Ted Moorman, and I'm glad you've come to this conference. So I'm going to be talking to you about data science, and I should let you know that my background is as a finance professor who has done research on portfolio optimization and trading strategies. So you may wonder how I got into kleptocracy. Well, I was looking for another research agenda, and I couldn't find a better one. So kleptocracy is a massively significant problem, so that's why I'm speaking to you today. I want to thank Michael for allowing me to be part of this conference, as well as Charles, and Nate, and Louise, and Hudson, and Track. I also want to thank Chris Westfall, who's in the audience, for giving many excellent comments that have contributed already to these recommendations. So what I plan to do is read some of these recommendations and comment on them. Really, the idea is to give a very strategic approach to the data strategy for government, and also to talk a little bit about information sharing that will be useful. So my first recommendation will have to do with network mapping and strategy, and thankfully a number of presenters have already shown some graphs, so you will know what that is when I talk about it. My second recommendation has to do with standardization and computability of data and reporting. My third recommendation is about the techniques and methods that will be applied on the data. My fourth recommendation is about resources and sharing those resources. And my last recommendation is about external collaboration and public-private information sharing. So there have been a number of changes in the data science field. Terabytes are a pretty common term. I think we saw, 211 terabytes a second? I had no idea, but that's incredible. And even petabytes are not mentioned infrequently anymore. And we have the possibility of very fast cloud computing, and even personal computers can do things much faster than that kind of distributed computing could do not long ago. Also, machine learning, natural language processing, neural networks, and other advances have become very standard tools in the data science toolbox. And a lot of that has been helped out by a wide range of open source options for the computational analysis of data. I guess, who are these recommendations for? These recommendations are for mainly intelligence and law enforcement, of course, people involved in national security and even strategic diplomacy, but I could see some applications also for the banking sector and perhaps some others who have to deal with large amounts of data and have concerns of risks of money laundering and corruption. So my first recommendation is that we essentially map out kleptocratic networks, not only map out individual networks, but we need to make sure we have mapped out connectivity between these networks. The reason we need to map these networks out is because it's important to have a proactive approach to addressing these problems instead of merely a reactive approach. So there's a lot of information that should be contained in these graph databases. They should go down to not just the kleptocrats themselves at the top of the chain, but also first degree and second degree connections. And a lot of metadata needs to be used to describe who these entities are. So, of course, addresses, names, and what kind of transactions have they done? What kind of travel have they taken? What have their communications been? And then ultimately using some of this theoretical graph analysis to figure out where important hubs of connectivity are that can be focused on to dismantle kleptocratic networks. This needs to be structured such that the graph is easily changeable and malleable, because kleptocratic networks change over time, and time series analysis on kleptocratic networks could be very valuable in dismantling those networks. So this network analysis, this has been made very commonplace by Palantir, Neo4j, many other open source software packages. And for example, Michael Loughnane, who spoke just a second ago, recommended collection of data on politically exposed persons, or PEPs. So this could be combined with the collection of data on PEPs' wealth, maybe, or changes in wealth and their financial transaction counterparties to better understand the operations, exposure to, and relative threat of kleptocratic regimes that are using the U.S. financial system. On to my second recommendation. So whenever possible, it's important to standardize the type of reports that are used for counter-kleptocracy, intelligence, and law enforcement purposes, such that these reports are designed for computational efficiency and can be easily entered and categorized in a relational database. So again, metadata fields will be important, descriptors for categorical entries, and some things are not going to be easily categorized and will have to be typed out or noted. It's important that those are electronically entered and can easily be processed by natural language programs. That should allow for existing fields to be better populated if they're not populated, and should give data collectors some idea of new fields that need to be populated. So for example, personnel in financial intelligence spend an astonishing amount of time reading suspicious activity reports filed by financial institutions. So thousands or maybe millions of SAR narratives have been filed, and those can be used to construct more and better defined categories relevant for SAR analysis. And of course, like all of us, SAR readers are also prone to cognitive bias, which will affect judgment regarding which SARs are significant. So it may be important to allocate time towards using computational analytics and natural language processing to determine which SARs are notable and whether important patterns exist across SARs that need to be recognized. So for my third recommendation, data scientific efforts should be focused on using suspicious pattern recognition, anomaly detection, the network analytics I've talked about earlier, and predictive analytics. Much of predictive analytics uses machine learning or estimated econometric statistical models. So why use those kind of techniques? Well, they're useful for any number of things: lead generation, targeting, preemptive action, evidentiary analysis. So it's important that all data scientists who are involved in this understand how these various techniques are applied. And it's also important that not only the data scientists understand, but analysts and law enforcement agents understand what the purpose of the techniques are and how those techniques can be used to analyze the data, and ultimately how you interpret some of that analysis. So really this master playbook that standardizes using data sources and variables needs to be incorporated into using these techniques. Again, this provides a proactive approach. A lot of this is predictive. The standardization, along with shared experience, should help to bridge some of these communication gaps between individuals and analysts or law enforcement and then data science roles. It should also assist in collecting data. Those involved in collecting data should be able to better understand what kind of information will be of the greatest value in that analysis phase. And recommendation 4. So there are a lot of agencies, there are a couple of agencies tasked with combating kleptocracy. They should be equipped with data scientists and data scientific software that can be used to apply some of these techniques on various relational databases that are relevant. There may also be secondary databases that are relevant. So both the experience in analyzing that data And the results from analyzing the data should be shared across agencies to promote better and more fruitful efforts in attacking these kleptocratic networks through data analysis, essentially. So while financial data is certainly necessary when it comes to analyzing kleptocratic regimes, it's probably not sufficient, as trade-based money laundering and bulk cash smuggling are other illicit tools that may be used by kleptocratic regimes to hide wealth. So in this regard, data on shipping, travel, customs, immigration will also be relevant. And to get a complete picture of the operations and activity of kleptocratic regimes, those data will need to be examined simultaneously for linked activity. And the data will need to be combined to gain a more complete picture of how kleptocratic networks are operating. Finally, on to recommendation 5, which is no doubt probably the most controversial recommendation I've come up with. So I would say, when possible, declassify and publish data relevant to kleptocratic threats to national security, thereby allowing non-governmental organizations, many of which are represented here, and institutions with investigative missions and analytical orientations to access the data. Otherwise, data could be published using de-identification methods that would help satisfy privacy standards and keep important information from being revealed to the kleptocrats themselves. For example, there are algorithms used for optimal de-identification. There's also application of data masking methods used in HIPAA. So the agencies that are involved in de-identifying data should also have the capability of re-identifying data and understanding the results brought to them by external collaborators. So through outreach and grants, researchers and external collaborators can be incentivized to use that data for forensic discovery and analysis to aid in combating kleptocracy's threat. Now that I'm thinking about it, I would probably add an additional recommendation. That would be more resources dedicated to the understanding of the causal effects of corruption on society, national security, and any number of important considerations. This could be a research effort from any number of the social sciences. Recently, there's been a causal inference revolution. Some have also called it a credibility revolution, looking at how to use empirical methods to better get at causality in what's often archived data. Okay, so why this last recommendation? Well, I think combating kleptocracy requires external collaborators because the problem is such a massive one. It's global, trillions of dollars, lengthy history, devastated entire countries. So I would say, in short, resources allocated to solve the problem will be outpaced by the resources necessary to solve the problem. And external collaboration offers the potential to allocate more resources at what could be much lower cost than would be possible otherwise, where costs are measured by money, time, coordination, effort, etc. Also, there is a recent emphasis in the empirical and quantitative social sciences on conducting forensic data analysis. The systematic evidence of scholarly work in this area has been published in the best peer-reviewed academic journals. Both the results from this research and the researchers themselves have respectively served as evidence and expert witnesses in criminal and civil prosecutions of the perpetrators of detected illicit activity. Also, the amount of government-collected information relevant to combating kleptocracy has been shared with the public at large or with external researchers may be considered relatively scarce. Some of this may be with good reason, yet some of this could also appear as excessive. For example, a section of the Financial Crime Enforcement Network's website allows for the acquiring of statistics on suspicious activity reports. SAR filings give the year and month, but they don't give the day. And I thought this was just a function of FinCEN trying to withhold data from us. But I recently found right before giving this that it's actually a function of how the collection is done. The collection is actually not done at the daily level. It's done at the monthly level. So maybe another recommendation would be perhaps it would be more helpful if the day of the activity were at least specified, or multiple suspicious activities were not bundled in a single monthly report. But suppose that the data is reported at a daily level, just humor me, and it's only reported at a monthly level. Well, if it were reported at a daily level, it would definitely help researchers to more accurately identify time clustering of suspicious activity. But of course, if that isn't desirable, and then low frequency SAR data perhaps could allow additional fields to be given, such as the origin and destination country and correspondent banking activities. And that would help researchers identify trends, patterns, and clustering relevant to law enforcement and intelligence. So I think detecting patterns of criminal activity is going to be most effective when data is at the most granular, detailed level possible. It's not always possible. At best, that's high frequency data with entity identifiers, even if those identifiers are anonymous. So I think the most likely solution, from what I can tell, is this process of de-identification and re-identification. And there have been a lot of advancements. There are a number of best practices practiced by numerous government agencies. And so I think these options need to be given serious consideration, especially based on the magnitude of the problem of kleptocracy that we have been discussing today. So I greatly look forward to your questions, many of your excellent comments that I've already received, and the breakout sessions to come. Thank you very much.